Emily Harper worked late on the silent corridors of Vesta 9, wiping sweat from her brow as she secured a loose panel in the maintenance duct. The station's lights hummed softly, and the distant stars glimmered through the viewport above her head. She paused when a small, high-pitched cry drifted through the steel walls, like a whisper of distress carried on an empty wind. At first she thought it was her mind playing tricks after too many hours of night shift. But the sound came again, urgent and full of fear. Emily followed the noise, her heart quickening, through narrow hallways lined with sealed doors. She stopped at a heavy blast door marked Containment Level Delta and placed her hand against the cold metal. The scream echoed again, higher and softer, and she pressed the override panel. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a dim cell bathed in pale blue light. Inside crouched a small figure, hunched against the far wall, scales glinting like moonlight on water. The alien girl's eyes were wide and wet, full of terror, and her tiny hands trembled as she reached toward Emily. Emily's chest tightened with compassion. She knelt at the edge of the cell and whispered, "I'm here," though she did not know if the girl understood her words. The creature's body shook, and a single sob slipped through her lips. Emily felt a wave of hurt and anger rise inside her, not toward the girl, but at the cold silence of the station that had left this child alone. She remembered her own niece's bright laugh and the small hands she used to hold. Emily glanced around, but no guard or scientist stood at the observation window. No one had come before. Taking a deep breath, Emily opened the glass panel and offered a small packet of nutrient paste. The girl's slender fingers reached for it with cautious hope. Emily held her breath as the creature's tongue, faintly luminescent, touched the offering. When the girl ate, her shoulders softened, and she let out a quiet breath that sounded almost like relief. Emily's eyes stung with tears she would not shed here. She leaned closer, careful to stay where the sensors would not trip an alarm. With gentle patience, she spoke softly about earth-green fields, the warm sun, the laughter of children playing without fear. She told the girl that no one deserved to be locked away and ignored. The alien's glowing scales shifted in soft patterns, as if she listened more with her heart than her ears. Emily realized she did not know this creature's name or her story, but she felt a bond stronger than duty or fear. She stood and pressed the release button on the panel that let fresh air drift into the cramped space. The station's recycled oxygen smelled stale, but to the girl, it must have tasted like hope. Emily wiped her hands on her uniform and promised, in her own mind, that she would not let this child's voice be lost in the void. As she turned to leave, the girl's sob rose again. But this time Emily answered with a promise carried in silence. She would be back. In that moment, the cold steel of Vesta 9 felt less like imprisonment and more like the beginning of a new story, one where empathy could bridge the gap between human and alien, where a single human act could awaken the warmth of kindness in the heart of a frightened stranger. Emily Harper closed the heavy blast door behind her and let out a slow breath. In the hush of her private quarters, she sank onto the edge of her narrow bunk and stared at the ceiling panels. Her heart still raced from the alien girl's sorrowful cries. Fresh worry mingled with a spark of hope. Emily tapped at the console beside her and opened the station's secure records. She needed to understand who the girl was and why she had been left alone in that cold cell as the data streamed. Across the screen, Emily read each line with mounting distress. The girl had been rescued from a derelict refugee vessel, her planet ravaged by war and famine. Scientists had classified her as Subject A12, stripping her of any name or history. Daily logs recorded only basic health checks and stimulus tests. There was no mention of kindness, no note of compassion. Emily's chest tightened as she realized how easy it had been to treat a living being like a lab specimen rather than a child in need of comfort. Anger and guilt rose inside her. Emily remembered her own niece Jasmine, waiting for her back home, always ready with a laugh or a hug. She could almost feel Jasmine's small hand in hers. That memory sharpened her resolve. No child, human or alien, deserved to be forgotten and unloved. Emily knew she had to do something more than silent witness. She closed the record files and stood, determination straightening her spine like a pillar of steel. In the days that followed, Emily gathered simple supplies. She sketched a few crayon drawings on spare datapad paper, swirling stars, green fields, and 2 stick figures holding hands. She printed them out and tucked them into a small envelope. Next, she retrieved a packet of nutrient gel, flavored with soft berry extract. It was not much, but it would taste different from the bland paste served inside the cell. Emily wrapped both items in clean cloth and hid them inside her toolkit. That night, Emily slipped through the station corridors with careful steps. The emergency lights glowed a dim red, and the hum of the life support systems felt like a heartbeat. Pulsing through the metal walls, she reached the containment door, her hands steady despite her racing thoughts. With a small override code, she opened the panel and slipped inside. The alien girl huddled in the corner, eyes wide and unblinking at the sudden warmth of human presence. Emily knelt before her and offered the drawings first. The girl's trembling fingers brushed the paper. Her scales shifted from pale blue to a gentle lavender, as if she felt curiosity stir inside. Emily pointed at the drawings and spoke softly, using simple words. "This is Earth. This is you and me." The girl tilted her head as though she listened, even without fully understanding.
Ow.
Then Emily lifted the nutrient gel and held it out. The girl's tongue flicked out, tasting the unfamiliar sweetness. When the alien took the gel, a single sound escaped her throat, a small, hopeful sigh. Emily felt tears prick at her own eyes. She reached out, letting her fingers hover near the girl's trembling hand. The alien hesitated, then slowly placed her palm in Emily's. The contact was electric in its gentleness, a bridge between 2 worlds. Emily smiled and squeezed lightly. In that moment, words were not needed. They sat together in silence, sharing the quiet exchange of trust. The girl hummed a soft, melodic tone, echoing in Emily's chest like a lullaby. Emily hummed back a melody. Her mother used to sing, their voices twined in the still cell, weaving a new bond of understanding. Emily realized that this child, far from home and frightened, had found a friend in a single human. As dawn's pale light filtered through the containment window, Emily rose to leave. She knelt once more and whispered, "I will come back." The alien girl watched her go, pressing her hand to the glass. Emily stepped into the corridor and closed the panel quietly. In her heart, she carried a promise, no matter how long it wore. She would answer the girl's call again and again, until freedom shone bright like the stars outside. ChatGPT said, Emily Harper made her nightly rounds with a quiet determination. After her shift ended, she slipped into the dimly lit service corridor, clutching a soft blanket she had stitched from old uniform scraps. In her other hand was a small toy she had fashioned from spare circuit parts, gentle wind-up bird that chirped when wound. The corridor lights hummed like gentle whispers as she walked, and her heart beat in time with each step. She paused at the heavy blast door marked Containment Level Delta, entered her override code, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the alien girl sat huddled against the wall, her glowing scales pulsing gently in the blue light. Emily knelt beside her and spread the blanket across the metal floor. The girl's large eyes glimmered with curiosity as Emily carefully placed the toy bird before her. With hesitant fingers, the girl reached out and wound the toy's little key. The bird began to chirp in a mechanical song, fluttering its tiny wings. The girl laughed, a clear, bell-like sound that echoed in the cell and warmed Emily's chest more than any heater ever could. Emily smiled, her eyes misting. She stroked the girl's slender hand and whispered, "For you." Over the next few nights, Emily brought more small comforts. She carried a tiny lamp that cast a warm yellow glow instead of the harsh blue light. She smuggled in a soft pillow from the crew lounge and tucked it under the girl's head. Each item was simple, but in the cold, sterile cell they felt like treasures. The girl, whom Emily now thought of as Leary, began to trust her. Leary's glowing scales shifted through gentle patterns as if she shared her feelings without words. Emily would sit beside her on the blanket, leaning close enough that their shoulders almost touched, and rest her hand on Leary's back. Together they watched the toy bird's little dance. One evening, Leary surprised Emily by tilting her head and speaking a single word. Near her, voice soft and musical. Emily froze, her breath catching in her throat. She had heard other creatures learn one or two human words in tests, but it felt different coming from L'Oreal and full of meaning. Emily repeated slowly near. Leary's eyes brightened, and she nodded once. Emily whispered, "Home," and watched Leary's scales glow warmer. They shared more words that night. Friend, hope, light. Each word echoed between them, weaving a bridge across their worlds. As their secret lessons continued, Emily told Leary about Earth. She spoke of green forests, blue oceans, and golden sunsets. She described children playing in fields of wildflowers and families sharing meals under open skies. Leary listened, her slender fingers tracing shapes in the air as if painting Emily's words into life. Sometimes Emily hummed a simple melody from her childhood, and Leary hummed back a gentle tune that rose and fell like distant bells. Their voices blended in the silent cell, filling it with warmth and music. But across the station, murmurs began. Security logs noted odd light usage in level delta, and maintenance crews reported misplaced supplies. Emily worried that their secret would be exposed. Still, each night she returned. She believed that no fear, no rule could outweigh the bond. She shared with Leary. One late night, as she packed away the lamp and toy, Leary pressed her hand to Emily's cheek. The touch was electric, soft, and urgent, saying more than any words could. Emily caught Leary's gaze, and in those deep, shining eyes she saw trust, hope, and a plea for rescue. Emily left the cell with her heart full of determination.
Outside.
The station's corridors felt colder, the lights harsher, and every echo seemed to carry the name Leary. Yet Emily held fast to her promise. She would return again, no matter the cost. As she stepped into the dark passage and the door hissed shut behind her, she whispered to the empty air, "I will not let you face this alone." In the quiet that followed, Emily could almost hear Leary's soft song of gratitude echo back, an unbroken promise, carried on the wings of hope. Emily Harper awoke before the station's lights fully brightened. Her mind heavy with the thought of Leary, she dressed quickly in her maintenance uniform and slipped into the corridor. Her footsteps echoing softly on the metal floor. Each breath felt like a promise she had made to the pale alien child who waited behind locked doors. When Emily reached the containment cell, she found Leary pressing her small hands against the glass, her glowing scales dim with worry. Emily knelt and whispered assurances, gently brushing her fingertips along the cold surface so Leary could feel warmth through the barrier. As usual, Emily brought the tiny lamp and the stitched blanket, but today she also carried a worried heart. She watched Leary's reaction as the soft yellow glow filled the cell, and the alien's scales brightened ever so slightly, a flicker of hope. Emily smiled, though her chest tightened with fear of discovery. Just then, footsteps sounded in the corridor. A stern voice called, "Harper, report to the science wing." Emily's heart pounded as she stood and offered Leary one last reassuring look. She tapped the override to close the door and hurried away. The science wing was brightly lit, all sharp angles and humming machines. Dr. Voss, the station's head xenobiologist, waited beside a tall console. He held a datapad and wore a grave expression. "Subject A12 is showing progress in response tests," he said, eyes fixed on the screen. "But her behavior is unpredictable. We must move her to Isolation Bay 7. There we can run controlled experiments without outside interference." Emily's stomach twisted. "Isolation Bay 7, she repeated, voice tight. Dr. Voss nodded. "Yes, it's deeper and more secure. She'll have less sensory input. That will help us measure her true baseline." Emily clenched her fists to keep them from shaking. "But she's learning language. She's showing signs of emotion. Isn't it that progress worth nurturing?" Dr. Voss's lips curved in a polite but firm smile. "Our mission is science, not compassion. We cannot allow emotional bonds to skew the data." Emily's chest felt cold and empty. "But she's a child," she insisted softly. "She trusts me." Dr. Voss's eyes flicked to Emily's badge. "Emily, You must remember your role here. Personal feelings create bias. Compliance is expected. Emily left the science wing in a daze. The station's bright lights felt harsher now, and every door seemed a barrier to justice. She clutched her datapad and headed to the communications deck, hoping for a moment of solace with her friend Marcus Lee. She found him adjusting frequency scanners, humming quietly. His warm smile lifted her burden slightly. "Morning, Emily," he said, but his eyes searched her face. She hesitated, then shared the news of Leary's impending transfer. Marcus's smile faded. He set the scanner's dial to silent and turned fully toward her. "They want to isolate her. They can't do that." His voice was a whisper of anger. Emily nodded, tears threatening. "I can't let her go. She needs kindness, not cold tests." Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "Want to help, but you know how risky this is? They trace it back to us." Emily held up a finger. "I have a plan to slow them down. I need you to jam the security feeds for a few minutes." Marcus's eyes widened. "That's sabotage, Emily." She looked down at her boots. "So be it. She's more than data points. She's alive." For a long moment, Marcus was silent. Then he reached out and touched her shoulder. "All right," he said softly. "I'm in." Relief and fear mixed into a fierce determination in Emily's heart. She smiled shakily. "Thank you." Marcus nodded, steeling himself. Together they drafted a simple code on a holopad, a timed loop that replayed the feed from an empty corridor. They set the timer for the exact moment of Leary's transfer. Emily left the holopad in Marcus's desk drawer. "I'll handle the override," she promised. Marcus squeezed her arm. "Be careful." Emily returned to her quarters and packed. Extra supplies. More drawings, sweets from the galley, and a small vial of calming serum used for crew stress tests. As she secured the vial in her toolkit, she closed her eyes and pictured Leary's frightened face melting into a trusting smile. Emily took a deep breath and whispered, "We'll get you out of there." The words felt like a lifeline in the silent darkness of Vesta 9, one human and one friend, ready to answer the caged alien's silent plea. Emily Harper woke before dawn on the day of the transfer. Her chest felt tight with fear and hope as she dressed in her maintenance uniform. She tucked extra supplies into her toolkit: the calming serum, more drawings, and a small packet of sweet fruit gel. She paused at her quarters door, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "Stay brave." Then she stepped into the silent corridor, her footsteps echoing on the metal floor. In the hydroponics bay, Marcus Lee waited behind a rack of tall green ferns. He held a handheld emitter that would trigger the diversion. Emily slipped beside him without a word. The air smelled of damp soil and growing plants, strange comfort before chaos. Marcus pressed the button, and all lights in the bay flickered off. Emergency alarms blared as red strobes flashed in the darkness. Sprinklers hissed, drenching the metal walkways. Guards and scientists rushed in, shouting orders. Marcus slipped back toward the service tunnels, signaling Emily to follow. Emily ran through narrow, dim tunnels she had memorized during late-night rounds. Each turn was a promise she had made to Leary. Her heart pounded so loud she feared it might echo off the walls. She reached the level Delta access door just as the alarms faded. The lock panel blinked green. Emily entered the override code and eased the door open. Inside, Leary sat on the blanket, her scales dull with worry. When she saw Emily, her large eyes filled with relieved tears. Emily knelt and pressed the small vial of calming serum to Leary's lips. The girl tasted it and closed, her eyes, her breathing slowing. Emily offered the familiar toy bird and blanket. Leary wrapped the cloth around her shoulders and wound the bird's key. The gentle chirp sounded like a promise. Emily scooped Leary into her arms. The girl pressed her head against Emily's shoulder, her small hands clutching the uniform. "Emily," whispered, "I'm here. You're safe now." They moved swiftly through the tunnels, Emily carrying Leary and Marcus beside her. Their path was littered with crates and maintenance tools. Each shadow might hide a guard. Emily held her breath when they passed a security camera, but Marcus's looped feed showed an empty hallway. The walls hummed with the station's engines. Above them, the corridor led toward the escape pod bay. Emily imagined the stars waiting beyond the pod viewport. A final door barred their way. It was heavy and had a keyed lock. Emily knelt and tapped a rapid code on the panel. The lock clicked open. She pulled the door inward and stepped into the bright pod bay. 7 escape pods stood in a row, silent and waiting. Leary peered at them. With wide wonder, Emily led her to pod 3, the one she had chosen for its clear viewport. She gently lowered Leary onto the seat and secured her harness. Leary looked up at Emily, eyes shining with trust. Emily checked the console and entered. The coordinates for the neutral outpost. The pod lights blinked as the systems hummed to life. Outside the viewport, Vesta 9 glowed like a distant diamond against the black sky. Emily slipped into the seat beside Leary, her hands steady on the launch control. Marcus watched from the hatch's face pale but determined. He placed a hand on the release lever and gave Emily a small nod. With a deep breath, Emily pulled the lever. The hatch sealed and the pod lurched forward. Alarms in the station faded behind them as the pod launched into the void. Leary squeezed Emily's hand, her glowing scales shifting into a bright pattern of joy. Emily smiled through tears and pressed a gentle kiss to Leary's forehead. "We did it," she whispered. The stars spun past the viewport, and for the first time, Leary was free to feel hope as wide as the universe beyond. Emily Harper settled into the escape pod's single small seat. Leary's tiny form curled against her side. The soft hum of the engines thrummed like a quiet lullaby. Outside the viewport, the vast blackness of space spread endlessly, dotted with distant stars. Emily reached out and took Leary's hand. The girl's glowing scales pulsed gently under Emily's touch. Each pulse felt like a message of trust. Emily gave Leary a gentle smile and whispered, "You are safe now." The pod systems automatically sealed the hatch and launched them on a steady course. Emily watched the instrument panel. Fuel levels were full, life support readouts were steady, and communications were online. She tapped the console to send a brief signal to the neutral outpost. A soft beep confirmed the transmission. Emily's shoulders relaxed. They were on their own now, but help was coming. Leary pressed her forehead against Emily's arm and hummed a quiet tune. The melody was soft and hopeful, and Emily's heart swelled with warmth. As the pod drifted farther from Vesta 9, Emily checked on their supplies. She opened a small compartment and offered Leary a packet of sweet fruit gel. The girl's eyes lit up, and she ate slowly, savoring each bite. Emily took a small taste. Herself, the gel was tangy and bright, a reminder of simple comforts. She folded her hands on her lap and closed her eyes for a moment. In the silence, she thought of home, green fields, warm breeze, and laughter. She promised herself that one day she would show Leary those wonders. Suddenly, the pod shuddered with a gentle tremor. Emily's eyes snapped open. "What is it?" she murmured. Leary touched the console, and the proximity alert winked on. A small field of space debris, microscopic shards, and ice particles drifted toward them. The pod's shields flickered as they passed through the cloud. Emily's heart raced, but the shields held steady. The tremor stopped as quickly as it had come. Emily exhaled slowly. Leary squeezed her hand, and Emily squeezed back. Together they rode the quiet after the storm, their trust in each other unshaken. Hours passed in gentle silence. Emily watched Leary press her small palm to the viewport, tracing the stars with slender fingers. Emily leaned close and pointed. "To a bright cluster? That is Cassiopeia," she said softly, using simple words. Leary hummed, her scales shifting through soft blues and greens. Emily told her more stories of the constellations: Orion the hunter, Lyra the harp, and Andromeda the princess. Leary listened, eyes shining like twin moons. Emily felt a calm joy, sharing stories under the silent sky. As the pod approached the neutral outpost, the view changed. A pale green planet came into view, its surface crisscrossed with rivers and lakes. Soft clouds drifted over vast forests. Emily's breath caught at the beauty. She had never realized how alive a world could. "Look from space." Leary pressed closer, her small face illuminated by the planet's glow. Emily placed her arm around Leary and spoke in a gentle voice. "This will be your new home, at least for now." Leary closed her eyes and let out a contented sigh. The pod began its descent. Flames of re-entry glowed outside the viewport, painting the scene in orange and gold. Emily braced herself as the pod shook, then fell into a smooth glide. The landing thrusters fired, and the pod touched down with a soft thud. Silence followed, broken only by the gentle hiss of cooling systems. Emily unbuckled her harness and scooped Leary into her arms. The girl's scales glowed a peaceful lavender, and Emily stroked her hair fine, silvery strands that shimmered like moonlight. The hatch opened, and the outpost's medical team rushed forward. They wore soft expressions, not harsh masks. A kind doctor knelt before Emily, speaking in gentle tones. "We received your signal. Please step aside so we can help her." Emily nodded and handed Leary over carefully. The doctor wrapped Leary in a warm blanket and checked her vitals. Leary's eyes met Emily's, and Emily smiled through tears. She had kept her promise. Leary was free. Emily stepped into the bright corridor, her boots clicking on the smooth floor. She looked back at the escape pod one last time. Silent thank you whispered to the metal capsule that carried them through the dark. Then she turned forward, ready to face a new chapter. In that moment, Emily knew that kindness could light even the coldest void, and that a single human heart could change the destiny of an alien child. Emily Harper stood in the bright hallway of the outpost, her heart full of relief as she watched Leary take her first steps on new ground. The girl's eyes sparkled with wonder at the smooth floor and the soft hum of life around her. Excitement made Emily's chest flutter. She reached out her hand, and Leary slipped her small fingers into Emily's palm. A gentle nurse guided them into a warm room filled with soft light. Walls were painted in calm shades of green and blue, and plants sat in neat pots along the windowsill. Leary pressed her forehead to the glass, staring at the trees swaying outside. Emily knelt beside her and spoke softly in simple words. "You are safe now, and you are home." Leary's scales glowed a soft lavender, and she nodded slowly. The next hours, Emily watched the medics examine Leary with kindness. They wrapped her in a gentle blanket and spoke in low voices, calling her by the name Emily, whispered earlier. Leary looked at Emily with shining eyes and repeated her new name, Leary. Emily smiled as tears sprang in her eyes. They brushed a strand of silvery hair from Leary's face and said, "This is your name now, and we will help you learn." When the doctors finished, they left Emily and Leary alone. The room felt quiet and safe. Leary reached under the blanket and pulled out the small wind-up bird Emily had given her. She wound its key and let it sing its mechanical song. Emily clapped softly, and Leary's laughter filled the space. The sound was bright and pure, warming Emily's heart with its hope. Emily sat on a low bench and patted the seat beside her. "Come," she said, and Leary climbed up. Emily held Leary close and showed her the drawings of Earth she had brought. The pictures of green fields and sunlit skies made Leary's scales shine with curiosity. Emily pointed to each image and whispered simple words: grass, sky, sun. Leary touched the drawings and whispered back the words. Their bond was stronger than ever. A soft chime sounded at the door, and a gentle woman entered with a basket of fruit. She offered a slice of sweet melon to Leary, who sniffed it curiously before tasting. The juice made her eyes widen with delight. Emily took a piece for herself and savored the bright flavor. She felt joy in sharing this simple meal with Leary, as though each bite was a promise of a new life. That evening, Emily carried Leary to a small garden courtyard just outside the medical wing. Soft grass crunched under Emily's boots in the fading light. Leary stepped carefully, her bare feet feeling the soft ground. Emily showed her the plant stall grasses, small flowers, and a young tree planted in the center. Leary reached out and brushed a leaf with her fingertips. Emily whispered, "It grows like you will grow here." Leary's scales shifted in a pattern of gentle greens and blues, a silent thank you. As night fell, Emily tucked Leary into a cozy bed in a small room, prepared just for her. A soft nightlight glowed like a star above the pillow. Leary reached for Emily's hand and held it close. Emily smiled and kissed the top of Leary's head. She whispered, "Good night, Leary. Dream of bright worlds." Leary closed her eyes and exhaled a peaceful sigh. Before Emily left the room, she paused at the door and looked back at Leary sleeping. The child's chest rose and fell in calm rhythm, her face relaxed and safe. Emily felt a surge of pride and warmth. She had answered the caged alien's cries, and now Leary could dream freely. Emily whispered once more, "We are family now," and slipped into the hallway. In the days that followed, word of Leary's rescue spread across human worlds. Messages of wonder and hope arrived from distant stations. Emily read each one with Leary by her side, pointing out new names and faces in the letters. Leary's eyes danced with excitement as she learned that kindness could travel far beyond one escape pod. Through simple axe-reading stories, planting seeds, sharing laughter, Emily and Leary built a new life together. Each morning began with bright greetings and ended with gentle songs. Under Emily's care, Leary learned to trust, to hope, and to dream again. And Emily learned that a single act of compassion could change the course of two lives forever. Their story became a beacon across the stars, a quiet message carried on light years of radio waves. When one human answers the cry of another, even from a different world, hope can bloom in the darkest places. And so, under alien suns and human skies, Emily and Leary forged a future filled with friendship, freedom, and the endless promise of tomorrow.